Hey, my little sinners and saints. I got another video or two I'm going to upload tonight. We'll try to get a couple more in before I start back to school. So let's get started. I'm trying to get better at this whole Canva thing. So I don't know. I don't know if I had anything, a video there. There's your disclaimer. Okay, there's people that go missing each year. There are over 22,000 missing persons on record in the United States, 22,981 to be exact. That's the number of missing persons in the online database at the National Missing and Unidentified Person System that, as of this recording, just 2 months ago, the number was 22,740. So that's 241 people who went missing just in 7 weeks. That's nearly 23,000 people who have gone missing, and many of them will never be found. Let's look at some pictures. Between 1901 and 2015, the database contained 15,495 entries. Most of these people are surely dead, some are underground. Some have been found underwater, and some will never be found. Some's been burned up in fires to where the the body just won't be found. And then, obviously in places where they've not been found. How many times have I said found? And underwater, never to be found. Some have been unrecoverable, destroyed, pulverized in junkyards, and others cremated in fire pits. Then there are, what is this shit? Then there are those whose remains are just out of view, daring to be found, and some of them someday may be found. On today's episode, we are going to be exploring one of those cases. The victim was in an unlikely place. Denise Huber had been looking forward to that night on June 2nd, 1991. Hold on, let me get to her. This was her night, and she was ready to go out and have some fun. She disappeared, and she was looking forward to the night because she and Steve Horrocks, her guy friend, had tickets to a concert at the Forum in Inglewood, Los Angeles County, which was one county over from where she lived. Denise was 23 years old, excuse me, and had just graduated from college. She was living with her parents in Newport Beach, which is a coastal city in Orange County, California. With mostly well to do families, Denise was in no hurry to go to work. I mean, she had part time jobs as a sales assistant at the Broadway department store and waiting tables, but she wanted to take maybe a year off and enjoy herself and enjoy her youth before taking the responsibilities of a full time career. And Steve, her friend, was a fun, outgoing dude who knew how to show Denise a good time. He scored free tickets to the concert and invited her, and he was supposed to be taking her, but just the night before the show, he found out that he had to work that Sunday night. He was a bartender at a restaurant. Where he worked was the old spaghetti factory. And because of this, he asked his pal, Rob Calvert, who was always friends with Denise, if he would accompany her to the concert and place in his place. And I'm not gonna lie, Rob thought Denise was super beautiful, so he was thrilled to take Steve's place and possibly accompany Denise to the concert, even if he didn't expect anything to happen between them, because Denise is like very serious with Steve, um, or with anybody else. Her relationship with Steve was pretty platonic. She generally avoided romance and intimacy at the point in her life. And then the unfortunate side effect of keeping these men in constant state of fawning over her because she was just accessible enough as a friend, but inaccessible romantically, which is something some guys can handle and some guys can't. Rob seemingly was one of those who was able to handle it, though, like Steve, he knew Denise for 4 years and had spent a fair amount of time with her. And he used to wait tables at the spaghetti factory too. Okay, let's get into some pictures. This is where they were going to the concert. This is Denise. This is Steve. That's him working on Sunday. It's the concert. That's them enjoying time together. That's not really them. I'm just making up shit. When she started college, so that's how all three of them met, was at the spaghetti factory. Um, Rob and Denise went to the movies together and to concerts, lots of concerts. Um, they really connected. Rob and Denise, just a few weeks before the concert, had went out drinking and dancing with Denise, and it felt really good. He felt close to her, but he was underscored that, but she underscored that boundary with him and seemed to respect that it wouldn't develop into anything more. And I'm guessing that he was still holding out hope, though, considering that when Steve asked him, he jumped at the opportunity to go, and he was really excited when he got the message from Steve asking Rob to take his place that night for the concert and take Denise to it. So Denise showed up at Rob's place at 7:30 p.m. sharp, which was their designated time. Denise was someone who was really good about being punctual. She was nothing if not consistent and reliable. And to Rob, she looked stunning, as he had never seen her that night. Sure, they were about to have a night out, and Denise was always stylishly dressed, but it was hard for him to not think that she dressed this way for him. But maybe he was getting his hopes up a bit. On their way to the venue, they stopped off at the liquor store and bought some vodka and OJ. And before the show, they done some pre-gaming. People say tailgating, pre-gaming. They did not. They didn't get seriously drunk, but they drank enough to get buzzing by the time the concert began. So at this point, the concert is going good, and during the concert, Rob put his round arm around Denise's waist, and she seemed okay with it. There may have been there he may have seen that as a green light, when in fact it wasn't. I don't know exactly what was going on inside of each of their heads. But at least for Rob, this was a profound experience. The intersection of the music, or the interaction of the music, the dancing, the physical contact, and both of them left the concert on a joyous high note, one that gave them much to talk about over drinks that night when they found themselves hanging out at the El Paso Cantina after the show. Before they got there, Denise stopped at a payphone and called Steve and invited him to meet them at the cantina for drinks after he finished his shift. He said he would try to make it out, and while they waited on Rob and Denise had a dance together. While they were waiting on Steve, Rob and Denise danced together, had some more beer, and Steve never showed up. He needed to save money, so he went home and went to bed. Remember, that's the boyfriend. Um, they spent the rest of the night. He did in, but a friend of theirs named Ross did show up, and much like Rob, Ross also had the hots for Denise. As I've said, Denise wasn't interested, but the three of them hung out at the bar until just past 1:30, which is last call when it's announced. It is also Sunday night, and Denise had to work the next day, so the three decided to call it a night. At this point, Ross decided to try to make another play for Denise to come home with him. Ross asked her, I don't think so. I asked her, and she said she didn't think so. Then she indicated to Ross that she also had to drop Rob back off at his house, and that's how it went. Ross and Rob were the last known people to see Denise alive after she dropped Rob off at his house. Denise Huber vanished without a trace. At first, when her parents found out that she wasn't home the next morning, they were concerned, but not too alarmed because she was trustworthy, mature adult. Let's get some more pictures. This is another picture of her, by the way. Ta-da! California, driving them home. Dun, dun, dun. There was the liquor store they stopped at. Dun, dun, dun. This is the parents. Okay. And they didn't keep tabs on her. They thought perhaps she could have come home after they had gone to bed and went to sleep. And then they left the house and then left the house after she picked up an early shift at her waitressing job. So they expected her um, to be gone early in the morning, and they, kind of expected to see her in the early evening. But when they eventually looked outside into her bedroom, and it appeared to them that the bed had not been slept in. I'm sure she just spent the night at Tammy's, the mother said. Um, Tammy's place. Denise's mother told Denise's father it wasn't uncommon for Denise to just crash at Tammy's place. So just to assure themselves to make sure that to make the anxiety go away, they telephoned Tammy, but upon talking to Tammy, they learned that Tammy had not seen her either, and then they really began to wonder. So they called Rob, and he explained that Denise had dropped him off at home around 2 a.m., and he assumed that she had just returned home to Newport Beach. Immediately after she had dropped him off, because that's what she said she was going to do following the phone call with Rob. Denise's parents called their son Jeff, but he hadn't seen her either, sorry. They called the restaurant where she worked. She never showed up for her shift. Likewise, the department store, which was her other job, they called hospitals to check and see if Denise had been admitted as a patient, but none of them had any record of her, and police departments in the town and the neighboring towns had not dealt with any accidents involving Denise or her silver blue Honda. Denise's parents weren't the only ones worried at this point, so was Sam, Denise's beloved black lab, who kept checking Denise's bedroom looking for her. Her parents, hold on, let me show you a picture of the puppy. They made the call, California, looking for, he's out looking. Maybe I don't got a picture yet. There's one in here though. Just calm down, people. Calm down. Let's not start a riot. Um, her parents spent the entire day phoning friends in a panic, trying to figure out what to do and how to like spend their time. Meanwhile, later that evening, um, Denise's friend Tammy got off work and she took the freeways of LA and tried to retrace the route that she felt Denise may have taken on her way home from Rob's house. She drove along San Diego Freeway, and just where it merged onto the 73, she saw Denise's Honda abandoned on the right shoulder of the highway with the emergency flashers on. Now remember, this is a whole night later. Tammy saw this and immediately started to scream and cry. She knew this was a very bad sign. When she found a payphone, her hands were trembling as she inserted quarters to call Denise's parents. She called them and told them what she had found. Okay, for some of you young people, a payphone is something that you would insert coins into, and you can make a phone call before cell phones. They're kind of like dinosaurs now. Every now and then you can see one. I think I have a picture somewhere along the way of one, so you can look at this spectacular payphone. Anyway, Denise's car gave them some directions on which were about 3 miles away from her. She's about 3 miles away from her house. Denise's mother and Dennis Huber, her father, arrived. They parked behind their daughter's car and walked up to it, and right away they noticed the tire was flat on the driver's side. The side window had been rolled down about 2 inches and the door was unlocked. Her mother knew she could feel it in her bones that something horrible had happened to her daughter. She and Dennis Huber returned home and called the Newport Beach police to file a missing persons report. The Honda was impounded by the police department and carefully examined. Nothing inside the car indicated that there had been a struggle. Um, Struggle had taken place. There was no blood, no damage, nor any unidentified fingerprints. The tire did not appear to have been tampered with, and the flat was caused by the tire being underinflated, which essentially caused the blowout. Denise's purse, her car keys, and her shoes were not inside the car. So it looked as she simply got out of the car and just walked away, probably looking for assistance. But then what happened to her? Neither of the call boxes close to Denise's vehicle had been used that night. And I don't know if y'all are familiar, but these are call boxes. They used to be on the road. You could call the police and get somebody to help you. Call boxes which stranded and motorists could use to call for roadside assistance were once a standard fixture on highways in the days before everyone had cell phones. A witness a witness who later contacted police reported seeing Denise's car with its flashers on stopped on the shoulder at around 2:25 in the morning, which was about 25 minutes after Denise had dropped Rob off at his house. But the car had been abandoned, according to the woman who saw it. No one was inside of it or near it. Bloodhounds were brought in to the scene, and the dogs picked up Denise's scent on the side of the freeway, but the trail went dead nearby. It seemed that Denise may have got out and walked a short distance from her car and possibly gotten into another vehicle. Police canvassed businesses, homes, neighborhoods, turned up nothing. No one in that area that night remembered seeing Denise. Search helicopters were sent out. In fact, the parents, could hear the helicopters from their house, and they knew what those helicopters were looking for. They were looking for a body. They hoped and prayed that they would find one. They hoped and prayed that Denise would come home alive. Meanwhile, the first person police wanted to talk to was Rob Covette. He had attended the concert with her and was the last person known to have seen her. They also talked to Steve, her platonic boyfriend. Both of these young men were cooperative and transparent, and neither Steve nor Rob raised any red flags with the investigators, nor did Ross, the mutual friend who had been invited to dinner. Um, Denise, okay, I'm guessing that Rob had an alibi. And the following day, police considered the possibility that Denise maybe had a secret boyfriend whom she maybe eloped with. That seems just so implausible to me. As I don't know, that just seems crazy. Um, but that was quickly dispelled. No one who knew Denise saw this as even plausible, so investigators quickly found themselves at a dead end with nothing. They had a young woman who simply vanished, and the trail went cold there. And less than 24 hours later, another 34-year-old, D, D, oh my God, Diana Prescott. This is a conundrum, vanished after dropping her, I don't think that's what that word is, a pseudonym. This is a pseudonym, vanished. I don't think that's right. Anyway, she vanished. She had two children and a strange husband. Um, an APB but went out on both Denise and Diane at the same time. But then 2 days after she went missing, Diane's parents received a phone call from their daughter who was 80 miles away in Riverside. She told them that she was okay and she had made the decision to get away for a little while and needed some space to rethink her life. And although Denise Huber was not the sort of person to just disappear on her own accord, her parents, upon learning about Diane Prescott turning up safe, had hoped to get a similar phone call from their own daughter. Police and the family finally turned to the media as a resource to make sure to get Denise's picture on the news, into the papers, and to get the story out to Newport Beach. The Newport Beach police had buttons made that featured Denise's picture on it. The words said, "Pray for Denise." Bumper stickers were made and distributed. There was even a billboard, remember that, was put up along the 73 near where her car was found. An airplane with a banner even flew across to try to generate and increase awareness of the case. $10,000 reward was offered for any information leading to Denise Huber's whereabouts, and all this resulted in a flood of tips, yet not one of them, not one single one, yielded any information that would lead to Denise. All of them ended up being a waste of time, but the amount of wasted time varied from tip to tip. One tipster, a woman from northern Orange County, claimed she knew that who abducted Denise, and her kidnapper was in Mexico and Mexican street gang that was holding Denise captive south of the border in Tijuana. Let me get to that. But when they pressed her for other information that the informant clamped up, um, so the investigators put the woman under 24-hour surveillance and even convinced a friend of the woman to wire a wire and try to pry information out of her. Eventually, they ended up traveling with her to Tijuana to try to find out the hideout of where Denise was allegedly being held, and it turned out that it was all a hoax. The woman just wanted a free trip to Mexico. So there was a lot of time wasted and resources wasted in the investigation. And it came to the attention of the investigator that a man who lived in Newport Beach was going around telling strangers that he knew what happened to Denise. Several of these people then went to the police, so they had multiple reports of the same individual, and it took them dozens of man hours to track this guy down, and he agreed to meet with them. He agreed to meet with the lead detective, but it had to be on his own terms. It had to be in a public place, he said, with a lot of people around, and it had to be in a place of his choosing. So investigators really didn't see a problem with accommodating these terms up to the point so what's the place that the man chose as the meeting place? What, oh, what could be the place that he would want to meet? Yeah, Chuck E. Cheese, baby. Got the mouse all day. Chuck E. Cheese. Now, I don't know what it is exactly about Chuck E. Cheese, but this is at least the third case that I have covered in recent months. Well, actually, longer than that. That Chuck E. Cheese has played kind of a minor role. So, this guy who claimed he had inside knowledge of Denise Huber's murder is insisting on meeting with the lead detective at the very public Chuck E. Cheese. But the game didn't end there. The witness refused to describe himself or set a designated meeting point. He insisted that the detective describe herself and what she would be wearing, and then he would find her in the crowd because he was feeling a little bit sketchy. Several plain clothes detectives were positioned throughout the restaurant. When the informant finally presented himself to the detective, he had his wife and several children along with him for the ride. They all sat down and ordered the entire menu. The informant started spitting barely comprehensible words um, about the blue Honda on the side of the freeway, even though the location he gave was wrong, said the detective. He's seen two guys struggling with a woman in the grass area next to the shoulder, and then the witness drove slowly by to get a better look at what was going on. One of the men pulled a gun and fired through the passenger side of his window, the witness's window, leaving a hole in it. Now, after dinner, the detective allowed him to drop off his family, and the lead detective went to the spot that he claimed all this had went down. He pointed to a few shards of glass on the pavement and claimed that was from his broken window, but of course, he already had it replaced. By the way, um, and then after that night, he refused to continue to cooperate with Detective Hoover, personally begged him to continue sharing information with the police. He coldly told the missing woman that he didn't want to get told the detective about the missing woman, that he didn't want to get involved after all this shit. After all, the police were pretty confident he was just after the reward money and nothing of value to actually contribute to the investigation. Meanwhile, Denise's parents were hounded by a celebrity psychic. Let me get to this. I gotta get to the psychic. The psychic, the psychic. Where is the psychic? Oh, I guess I got a picture of the psychic. Okay. Who was insisting on a shot at finding Denise. The Hubers didn't believe in psychics, but this one wore them down, so they invited the psychic into their home where everything was closed off. The woman closed her eyes and began describing a dog. First, a black lab, like Sam. I could swear I picture him. Um, then one that was hubris. The woman only described one dog that actually looked like Sam, the little black lab, and the rest of it was just crazy. She's talking about a tan spaniel, a mutt, um, former pets of the Hubers that didn't match up. Um, Now the Hubers were quite impressed by this. It gave them hope that this sidekick could maybe be the real deal, but then the psychic's output deteriorated into nonsense. What I said, who perhaps had a sixth sense and should have fraud. Talking about mutts. The Hubers even paid for a private detective or a private investigator, sorry. The Hubers hired turned out to be useless as the psychic. The investigator said that she was dead, abducted, and killed, that the flat tire had been staged to look as though it had been a blowout. He said he interviewed people who drove past the area between 2 and 6, and they didn't even see her Honda. There was no evidence police had collected, both from the witnesses' interviews and the location where the car was abandoned, contradicted what the PI was claiming. All his theories were incorrect, unsubstantiated. The family was beginning to run out of hope. Denise's friends, like Steve Horrocks, grew to believe that Denise was dead. Years passed without a clue. The Hubers changed their answering machine greeting to include a message that said, "We will accept a click call from Denise Huber," hoping that someday their daughter would emerge from wherever she was, and if she was trying to get in touch with her parents, they would not be any obstacles. But the more that time passed, the colder the case became. In 1994, there was the first glance that would appear to be completely unrelated, completely unrelated event 350 miles away in the city of Prescott, Arizona. Elaine Catalina and Jack Court were business partners as well as boyfriend and girlfriend. They own a paint manufacturing business in Phoenix, Arizona, baby. And a few times each month, they drove up to Prescott to trade products at a flea market that was near there. In the spring of 1994, they became acquainted with a fellow vendor named John Formalero. Won't call him John, a painting contractor who sold paint supplies from a booth at the market. John was 39 years old and he told them that he had recently relocated his business from California to Arizona. Hmm. Hmm. Let's see if I got pictures. But to make a fresh start, he was friendly enough, and the couple established enough of a rapport with him that they would stop and chat with him each time they set up at the market. A couple of months later, in July, John, the contractor, happened to mention that he had a surplus of colors at his home in the town of Dewey, about 18 miles away. Jack and Elaine told him that they were interested in buying some of John's, um, paint. So he invited them to follow him back to his house. After they packed up everything, they took Elaine's 10-year-old grandson, who made the trip with them to Prescott, and followed John's van back to his home, which was in an upscale housing tract of luxurious homes. They approached a large L shaped 2-story house with a 2-car garage and were led into the parking pad at the side of the house, where they also, in the same parking pad, there was 2 vehicles that were parked there. One was a white pickup. I would say Dodge, but I don't know. One was a white pickup truck, and the other was a yellow Rider rental truck with Massachusetts plates. And they're in Arizona. He come from California. Partially covered with a canvas tarp and surrounded by paint cans. Now, this struck the couple as kind of odd. Why did the contractor have a Rider rental truck parked beside his house? And what was he using it for? And furthermore, the truck looked as though it had been there for a while, given that the tarp was covered in and all the junk around it. Um, it was all covered with dust. And the body of the truck normally would you would return the rental truck after you used it. Excuse me. Elaine and Jack both had the same thought at the same time. This truck must have been stolen. Suddenly, Elaine's grandson told her that he needed to go pee and asked John, the contractor, if he mind allowing the little boy use his bathroom. And the contractor's demeanor suddenly sharpened. No, John said. Not possible. The water in the house was turned off, so there was no toilet. This raised the couple's suspicions that they weren't buying what John was saying. He walked away, and his head turned, as he was walking away, just kind of looked back at him. Elaine quickly jotted down the license plate number of the Ryder truck and the serial number, which was just above the cab, after they finished their business and bought the colors. That they got back into the car and went to Elaine's grandson and shut the doors. Sometimes some things not right here, Elaine said to Jack. I agree, he told her, and they both agreed that the truck must be stolen. When she got back to Phoenix, she said she put the piece of paper with the truck's information in a drawer. The warehouse they owned. The following week, a friend of theirs who was a detective was visiting the warehouse to buy some paint. His name was Detective Steve Gregory of the Phoenix Police Department. And Elaine happened to tell him about the strange situation with this John guy and the rental Ryder truck. She gave him the plate number and the VIN number, and said that the detective said he would look into it. After leaving, Gregory was curious enough to look into the vehicle to see if it had ever been reported stolen. He called the Ryder company and gave them all the information, the serial number, all this. And within an hour, the security division of the Ryder phoned the detective back to tell him yes, the vehicle had been missing since January of that year from the rental facility in Orange County, California. He asked for the VIN number, which the Ryder the lady had put on there, and wanted to know if he wanted to press charges. And of course, absolutely he did. Then he called up to the, I don't know how in the hell you say this, Yavapai County Sheriff's Department to advise them the stolen rider truck was parked in a residential driveway in Dewey. He provided a license plate number, and deputy went out to investigate. And when the deputy Joe DeComo arrived at the house, he indeed found the Ryder truck in the side driveway, but the truck didn't have Massachusetts plates anymore. It had Maine plates and a different license number. Deputy Gamacho then called Deputy Gregory back and told him that there was something weird going on. They had different license plates on the truck, and perhaps this is why Detective Gregory was a detective and Deputy Gamacho was a deputy. Um, they figured out that they had switched the plates, but the VIN number matched. So they think that it was switched overnight. The same truck, the Ryder truck, they opened up the back of it, took a look around, and they found a lot of buckets and canvases of various sizes surrounding the truck and other side of the fence in the yards, countless buckets and cans. And then they noticed the extension cord extending from the back of the truck out of the back beneath the padlock rear cargo door and into an outlet on the side of the house, so that the deputy is like, okay, this looks like some meth lab. They were the That was the most obvious explanation of why the extension cord would be powering something inside a stolen truck 24 hours a day. So deputy, we're gonna call him Deputy G, summoned the narcotics team, which arrived that afternoon. Immediately began testing the contents of the buckets and cans that are outside of the truck for illegal drugs. They did not find any. So they tried gaining entry into the truck, but it was secure with heavy padlock. So they had to call a locksmith to come out there to gain entry. The truck, instead of finding a meth lab, they found amid more stacks of containers and cans, eerily isolated at the far back end of the cargo bay, an industrial sized freezer. Oh, I'm getting another freezer tomorrow, by the way. Um, Oddly, this might not be a good time to bring that up. Um, which was switched on and running. That's why the extension cord was from the locked freezer of the stolen truck and plugged into the wall. There was masking tape all around it, and it was the seal had not been broken. See, that's the freezer they found that was in there, and you see the buckets. When they did break the seal open, a ghastly smell knocked them backwards. It was the smell of decay in the freezer. They saw a large black garbage bag with something bulky inside, and one of the narcs touched the bag. He felt a frozen arm of a human being, and that's whenever the narcotic team's investigation was at an end and homicide took over. The homicide investigators prepared to open the freezer by donning hazmat type suits. And once they did begin to cut the bag, opening, the first thing they saw was two human arms handcuffed behind the body. Beneath the body, there was frozen blood and fluid intermingled with ice crystals, and the head of the victim was covered with two additional plastic bags. So they didn't yet know what kind of, was it a man, was it a woman? Um, and there was some level of decomposition, so that told them that the body wasn't frozen immediately. The crime lab, let's see, they towed the truck with the freezer inside of it to Arizona State Crime Lab. Before the body was taken out of the freezer, a forensic examiner was careful to obtain fingerprints while the body was still frozen, because it's the fingers are the first part of the body to lose their shape once it begins to defrost. So they rolled it with ink, and the same they do as when they arrest people. The still frozen body was taken to the medical examiner, who was faced with a level of challenge she had never come across before. She needed to thaw the body in order to perform an examination and determine exactly how the victim died, but thawing the body would cause it to rapidly decompose. So she was racing against the clock to secure valuable evidence before it disappeared as the body began to thaw. The medical examiner took fluid samples and collected them in jars. Remarkably, among those samples, she was able to collect intact semen. Despite being froze for 3 years, this established that the woman had probably been raped, which was later confirmed at the autopsy. Meanwhile, John, the contractor, had pulled into his driveway, and he stumbled upon the scene where his truck's gone. Sheriff deputies are everywhere, and they place him under arrest of the Ryder truck. His mother had been inside whenever they pulled up in his Jeep with him at this point and was quite confused as to what was happening. She lived in the adjoining house. Um, so detective accompanied her to her house and explained that the Ryder truck that her son had been keeping in his driveway was stolen. This was news to her, she claimed, but she didn't ask any questions about it. She assumed it was connected to his business. She was shocked to hear that there was a body that had been found inside in a freezer. She didn't know anything about this, nor did she seem to know much about her son. Other girls have just broken his heart. Please pray for us, she asked the homicide detective. Within 2 hours of the initial discovery, search teams arrived at the property while John's mother sat in a lawn chair across the street and watched the search team enter the house and went through every room. Several incriminating items were found in shelves inside the garage. Police box. Um, there was a box labeled Christmas, and inside of it was a second container. It had nail polish, a roofing tool to pull out nails, a crowbar, and it was all stained with blood. Handcuffs. I forgot those. And the blood that was on all this stuff was the victims. They also found ID documents of various women and names. They found another box named called Christmas. Looked inside. They found bloodstained clothes. They found Denise's clothes bloodstained, and they also found John's clothes bloodstained. There was a hammer in there. It was bloodstained. It was inside of a plastic bag. Um, they took Denise's fingerprints and they realized who she was. And so they contacted the parents. Plus, they found her driver's license, her credit cards, her checkbook, her keys, her high heel shoes, the clothes she'd been wearing that night. Her shoes had scuff marks on them. Obviously, that's, being dragged away. He had a freaking dungeon. He had a dungeon in his basement, and it was lined with paint cans. They also found firearms and a police uniform, videotapes with contents about Jeffrey Dahmer and Charles Manson. Woohoo! They began to fear, based on these findings, Denise Huber may not have been John's only victim. They brought cadaver dogs in. I think I got pictures of the cadaver dogs. Um, They never found nothing down in the dungeon, though. They never found not one piece of evidence. But this was Denise's skull. This is how much he hit her and broke her skull up. There was duct tape over her nose and her mouth. When she was defrosted, it was found that her skull was extensively damaged, and so they determined exactly what happened. A forensic anthropologist had to reassemble the puzzle that had many pieces. Denise's skull, which had fallen apart after Denise's body had thawed, and once the skull was reconstructed, two different types of injuries were found, suggesting two different types of weapon, and small pieces of plastic were lodged inside the skull fragments, suggesting she received at least some of the injuries while she had the bags over her head. She was handcuffed and she was naked. Other women come forward and said John had drove them deep into the desert, forced them to strip, tried to strangle them. They fought him off. They ran naked through the desert. Denise went missing. If this wasn't all enough to charge John for Denise's murder, the fact that his DNA matched the semen that was recovered from Denise's body. The blood from the clothes matched his. Her blood was on his clothes. And he pleaded not guilty. And then on June 20th, 1997, 6 years after Denise first went missing, John was convicted of first degree murder and sentenced to death. He appealed the verdict in 2011, but the verdict was upheld currently. He is awaiting execution at San Quentin. I think I got a picture of him awaiting execution. Oh, dadgummit. This is a picture of him. No, that's the cops, I think. I could have swore I had a picture of him. When I go to upload these, if I try to upload too many, then it doesn't catch them all. So, okay. This is, I'm going to end this one and I'm going to upload another one, try to get another one in tonight. So, two more, hopefully. Thank y'all for joining me as always, my little saints and sinners. I will talk to you later. Bye.